quilty friends, it's Carolina Moore, your favorite sewing and quilting YouTuber, and today we're going to use a fabric panel to make this really fun advent calendar. Now, Katarina Roccella of Art Gallery Fabrics designed this really fun advent calendar panel that has instructions that come with it, but I have veered a little bit off those instructions because I wanted these pockets to stick out a little bit, and so I've designed it a little different. I do have kits available that include the interfacing that you need, as well as the backing fabric, because I've added backing fabric to this project. The backing fabric's here as well. And we're going to put this whole thing together. If you want information on those kits, go down to the link below. If you're looking for a different kind of pocket advent calendar, I have patterns so you can use your own fabric to make a pocket advent calendar. The pocket advent calendar pattern that I have comes in 2 sizes, and both sizes are in the same pattern. So this is the larger version with 25 pockets. These stars, super simple to make with a strippy star ruler, and it has nice big pockets. And then if you want a little one that can stand on a table with the little table stands, this one also has nice pockets here, and they're good size for being a 12-inch square advent. This one only has 12 pockets, and although these stars look super tiny, again, it's made with a strippy star ruler, so they're all strip piece and easy to make. All right, friends, let's start talking about the materials that you need to make the advent calendar we're doing today, which is this Art Gallery Fabrics panel advent calendar. The supplies that you're going to need are this panel. You can get this from your favorite local quilt shop, or I did buy some of these and I have them in my shop, which I will link down below. So you can get this panel from me. And if you are quick, I actually have put together some kits that have exactly what I'm using. So this is 2 yards of a medium weight fusible interfacing and 1 yard of a backing fabric. This is also Art Gallery. This is not from their Christmas line. Yep, the Flower Society is what I'm using. You can see the selvage there, the Flower Society. And this is, a couple years back, but you might be able to find some if I'm out, because I will be making some kits, but once I'm out of the backing fabric, then that's as many kits as I'm going to make. Okay, so we have, it's 2 yards of medium, 2 yards of medium weight fusible interfacing, the panel, and backing fabric. And I'll have some that are just the panel as well. So either the full kit or the panel only if you want to make this as well. Let's move this all out of the way, and we're going to start by cutting up this panel. We'll get a good look at the whole thing. So we have, it's upside down, but we have the front of the panel, and this is the fold here, so we can open it up on the fold. This is what the front looks like. These are all the little, they're all numbered. These are the pockets. This is the big pocket that goes on the bottom, which I suppose could be optional if you wanted. These are the ornaments, and this is the instructions. So I'm going to cut this apart. It shows to cut down these lines as well. I'm not at this point going to be cutting down the lines. I'm just cutting in this kind of dead space between everything. And it doesn't need to be perfect. It's just this panel is, I think it's a little over a yard. And so it's a lot of fabric to be moving around on my little space here. So we will just do a quick choppy down of this. All right, these are our instructions. I will refer to them and I will show you how to do it according to the instructions if you wanted. I think my way is going to get us an advent calendar that's just going to stand up to time a little bit longer. So it'll be multiple layers and it'll stand up pretty well, I think. So we have this ornament portion of the panel left. We're going to go ahead and make the ornaments in another video because this video is going to be long enough. So go ahead and set this aside, and another video will be coming your way soon on putting together these fun ornaments. I have my front and I have my pockets, and the rest I've set aside. Both of these I want to fuse to the medium weight interfacing. So I'm going to lay out my ironing pad here, and I'm putting my fusible interfacing down with the bumpy side up. And you can see it's just too big for this piece of interfacing. So we turn it sideways and we're going to do 2 passes on the interfacing, and that's fine. Whenever you're using fusible interfacing, there are 3 measurements that are going to determine how well your fusible interfacing sticks to your fabric. One is how hot you have your iron. One is how long you keep the iron in that spot. And the third one is how much you push down to be able to make that contact between the fusible and the iron. And basically what a fusible interfacing is you can feel these little bumps. Sometimes it's a spray that's on there, so either bumps or spray of a kind of like a meltable. Think of it almost like a plastic. If you think of it as like those like perler bead plastic melts that you may have played with or your kids may have played with as a child, then you can think of how long and how hot did I need to push down to melt those. And they become kind of liquidy, and that liquidy gets between the fibers of the fabric and sticks into those fibers of the fabric, and then when it cools it becomes like solid concrete into the fibers of the fabric. Tiny little bits of solid plasticky concretey stuff. So having it nice and hot so that those little beads actually melt, having it long enough time to give that heat time to work so that those little bits melt, and then having enough pressure on here so that it really gets in contact with those melty bits and those melty bits get into the fabric. All of that is going to make sure that you have a nice good hold as we fuse this on. Alright, so now that you understand the basics of fusing, if you didn't before, we're just going to keep going and fuse this in place. And we're going to do the same with the pocket pieces as well. I have the fusible on the back of my panels. I did a slight like 1/4 inch overlap of the fusible just to make sure that there weren't any gaps. Sometimes that can leave a little bit of bulk, but I'm not worried about it. I can kind of feel if I really want where that is. Honestly, I'm not worried about. But I'm going to take first this back panel, so that's the one that doesn't have the lines, the cut lines on it, and I want to square this up to get this ready to go. And the panel itself, the printing I was always done straight, but sometimes when things get like put on bolts, like it gets a little wonky, you can beforehand kind of like stretch it out and try to like bring it back to square. I don't generally do that with panels. I just let them be the way that they want to be, and I worry about it when squaring up. So that's what I'm going to do here. And because this table isn't quite big enough, I'm actually going to do this sideways here on this table. And I'm going to start on the bottom. So you can do this a couple different ways. You can see that there is quite a difference here on this bottom. It's going at a decent angle, and there's definitely like a little hook in here. Again, I'm not really worried about that, but I do want this all to stand or hang straight when it hangs. So I'm actually going to start on a side. And as long as your 1/4 inch seam allowance is in here, I'm lining this up with kind of the windows here. It's a little off. I'm not too worried about it. I'm just going to square off this end. And this part here is going to get hidden in that 1/4 inch seam allowance when this all gets sewn together. If you're worried about it, you can always at the end do a bigger than 1/4 inch seam allowance. That's also totally an option. This is a little taller than my ruler, so I'm just lining up the edge that I've already cut and cutting it across. Okay, so now I'm going to do a 90-degree across this top, which means that I line up a line on my ruler, and the bigger ruler you have, the more you'll be able to line this up. There we go. And just trim that away. And now if I make sure that this side is, so if this corner here is exactly 90 degrees, as long as I make sure this corner here is exactly 90 degrees, then everything will be straight and line up. I missed a little bit of a cut there, so let's cut that. Now if we want to see how well we did on this top and bottom, we can, or I guess it's not the top and bottom, it's the two sides. It's top and bottom from where I'm standing. We can fold this in half, and this top is nice and straight, and these two sides line up. So I did a good job of those 90-degree angles. Now I just need to cut this bottom, and that means that a line here should line up. And it should also, it might not line up exactly with one of the marks here on the ruler. That's okay. Decide what I want in the seam allowance. That's going to be hidden away. And there we go. So you can see it's a little crooked over here, but this is really going to get hidden in the seam allowance. And actually it's going to be even more hidden because there's going to be a pocket over this. So this really won't show at all. No one will ever see that. And this, there might be a little bit of this that shows in the top. I could always add a little trim there if I was worried about it, but I'm really not. So that is our main panel. Now we need to do similar but smaller with our pocket pieces. Both the big pocket that's going to go on the bottom and then all of our little pockets here. Alright, I'm going to start with this big pocket down here. I'm lining it up with the bottom of the door. I'm deciding that's what my straight edge is going to be. And I'm making sure that any of this white is tucked away in the seam allowance, and it is. Oh, shifted a little bit while I was cutting. There we go. I'm turning this, and I'm using the lines on my mat. I know that there are folks who are, oh, you don't use the lines on the mat. I'm using the lines on the mat, y'all. And I'm lining it up with the lines on the mat. And I'm going to use my ruler to find a good spot. That looks like a good spot. And I'm lining up my ruler with the lines on the mat. And now this will be a straight pocket. I'm just going to trim off the sides. I'm going to leave myself a little extra room just in case. So at the end when we put this pocket on, it's not short compared to the front that we already cut. I could have measured the front and cut this the same as the front. But as long as it's at least as big as that front, then we're good there. So I'm going to set this aside as well. Don't need this right now. And we're going to cut these strips. Now you can see here there is a fair amount of wonk on this. And that means that these are definitely going to be imperfect when they go on. And I don't mind the imperfect. If you want these to be perfect, you can follow the instructions that come with, and you'll cut exactly on these lines, and you'll do fold over. We'll talk about that when we get to that part of it. But I want to be able to do these in big strips. It's actually going to go together a little faster. And I think it'll be fine. Cutting there. I'm cutting these, looks like at 4 inches. So these are just going to be 4-inch strips. And some of this will get tucked away in seam allowance. Some of it will just be part of the windows. It will still look cute when it's done. Alright, I just need to do the same with all these other ones. Cut them up into their 4-inch segments. Alright, now I've brought our back here so that we can cut the backing fabric piece that we need for the back. And that's because the fabric piece that we need for the back is the biggest fabric piece. If we cut all of our smaller pieces first, then we would use whatever was left over for the back, and it might not all fit. So to make sure that it fits, and this is just general in quilting, we like cutting the biggest pieces first and then cutting into the smaller and smaller, because it's easier to cut a small piece from a small piece left of fabric than a big piece from like a chunked up piece of fabric. So we're gonna grab this, and this doesn't need to be perfect. So I'm gonna bring it pretty close here to the selvage. We'll do it sideways again so that we can see it. Now I want just a little bit of this extra because it's going to help when making our pockets. So I'm actually going to cut about 1/4 inch away. And you could open this up if you had a big table and do it with a rotary cutter. But I just want a little bit of extra fabric to give me the room to groove when I do those pockets. And then here on the bottom, I'll also give myself about 1/4 inch. We're going to be trimming this all off at the end. So it does not need to be perfect now. If you're someone who likes watching a project all the way through from start to finish, then you'll understand how this all works before you sew yours. Or if you're doing it with me in real time, that's also great. You can just do it with me in real time and trust that I know what I'm doing, because if I didn't, I would edit this part out. So if it's in here, we're good. Okay, so we have the back with its backing fabric. Okay, now I can take this extra fabric. I'm gonna fold it in half just so that I have a smaller piece on my working table here, because my working table is not nearly as big as you think it is, I promise. And I'm going to, using the fold as my straight edge for my line, I'm going to use a rotary cutter and cut off this edge. And now I'm cutting this into 4-inch strips. Now if when you cut your pockets they ended up being 4 1/8 or 4 1/4, then cut your strips that size. If yours ended up being 3 3/4, cut your strips that size. Mine were 4 inches, so I was about to cut it 5 inches. We're going to cut 4-inch strips. And there's 4 rows of pockets, so I need 4 rows of strips. While I'm cutting the backs for pockets, I have my big pocket here that we cut, and I want to cut one the same width as this. I don't remember if I even checked how big it was, but we're just going to cut the same size. And that's going to be the back for this big pocket. And then this will be my leftover fabric. I don't think I'm going to need this for anything, but we'll keep it aside and it can just go into scrap or stash. Alright, we're ready to work on our pockets, but I want to show you, using this scrap piece of fabric that I put some of the interfacing on, how the instructions were to have you make it in case you wanted to make it according to instructions. You would have put that fusible on the back, and then you would have cut everything on the lines, and you'd end up with a little rectangle, a little bit smaller than this, but about like this. The instructions have you fold 1/4 inch to the back, and you can measure this so that it's exactly 1/4 inch, and then 1/2 inch to the front. And you can pin this or you can clip this to secure it, but then you'd have this like double pleat situation here. And then you take this to your sewing machine, place this under your presser foot, and then with our 1/4 inch seam allowance, we're going to sew forward and then reverse back, and then just go forward again, so that way it's really secure. put your needle up and then cut that thread. And then we'll do the same on the other side. Before we turn this right side out, we want to clip these corners. So we're just clipping the extra fabric so we don't have a bunch of fabric in these corners when we turn it right side out. And then we turn it. I'll use a little ballpoint turning tool to just push these corners out. You can see this tucks right under here nicely. These are starting to fold in a 1/4 inch. So you have your 1/4 inch sides on each side. And then you can fold that bottom up a 1/4 inch. And you'd have a nice little pocket. You can just stitch right here. So stitching this flap down. And you'd have just this nice little finish on the top pocket. So that's how they have you make them, which you totally can, but it just makes a very flat pocket, and I wanted to be able to use the extra fabric in here to be able to have some depth in my pockets. All right, I have my long strips. I've given a quick press to these ends that are on the fold just to kind of get that fold out. And I want to put these right sides together. So a background or a backing strip with this front strip. You can pin or clip if you want. And you can see that extra little bit that I have because of the selvage. It just gives me a little extra room on each end. If I didn't have it, it wouldn't be the end of the world, but it's just nice to have on there. So I'm putting these right sides together. And I'm going to sew a tube. So I'm sewing a 1/4 inch on this side and a 1/4 inch on this side, leaving both my ends open. I'm going to do that with all 4 of these pocket pieces. Okay, I have them all made into tubes, and now we need to turn these tubes right side out and press them and top stitch just the top edge. The bottom edge is going to get sewn down when the pocket gets sewn down, so we don't need to top stitch that that bottom edge. We just need to top stitch the top edge. So we're just going to flip these. I'm just using my fingers. These are big enough, but if you have a favorite turning tool that you want to use to turn these, you can do that as well. And then once they're turned right side out, we give them a press. You just want to match up that seam edge. Get it as clean as you can on both the top and the bottom. You're getting these nice little window pieces. Alright, we're going to repeat this, making these tubes with all 4 of the pocket rows, and then we'll come back to top stitch this. Before we go ahead and top stitch these, I'm actually going to do this bottom pocket, and for this one it's the same as these, where we're lining up the fabric right sides together, but we're not making a tube this time. We're only stitching this top edge. So we'll only need to stitch one side, this top edge, and then flip it and press that top edge. So now we're going to top stitch just the top edge of all 4 of the small strips, as well as just the top edge of the big strip. These are all of our pocket pieces, and the bottoms are all going to get sewn down. So we just need that top edge to look a little more finished. We're just going to add top stitching. When I do a top stitching, I like to bump up my stitch length by 2 little bumps. So I just go to that length and I go boop boop. So that on this machine brings it to a 3.5. And then when I do my top stitch, I don't go to a 1/4 inch, I go to 1/8 of an inch, so right at that edge. And the nice thing about the longer stitch length is that you'll see it stitches much faster. And so we're just going to top stitch all 5 of these pocket strips. Okay, we have all of our pocket strips ready to go, and I've taken this background, so not the backing fabric is separate for now, but just this background and a chalk pencil, and we're going to make some marks on here. So to give you an idea of where this is headed, we're going to sew on this middle line between each right here, but you can see that this strip is too long. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take each one and bring it in and sew on it, bring it in and sew on it all the way down, and that's going to give us our depth to our pockets. So we want to set up also where this straight line down the bottom is going to be on each one of these windows. So I'm going to use my straight edge. I'm going to use this straight edge here at the bottom to be my straight edge for these windows. And I'm just using a chalk pencil so this will come out easily. And giving myself a nice good line. On all these window units. And the windows behind are really going to get hidden by these pocket windows. So you really don't need to worry too much about these windows. Just kind of finding the lowest window and lining it up with that. And now we want our center lines, which should be a 1/4 inch away from each side. Now we're going to lay out all of our pocket pieces. Now these pockets have the numbers in a random order, so if you if you really cared the order that they were in, you should have done the Art Gallery Fabric instructions way so that you can put them in the order that you want. And now you get a little bit of decision because you can decide which one goes where. And I drew a line at the beginning and at the end, so a 1/4 inch away from the sides of each window, and we're going to use that for pinning here in just a second. So decide how you want your windows on there, and now we're going to pin each side. So I'm going to pin it so that this pink line right here, this pink edge, is lined up with my white line, and the bottom here is lined up with the other white line. And we're going to add a couple pins. I don't do a lot of pinning in general. I'm not a big pinner, but for things to line up like this, I'm definitely going to pin. So again, I want the pink line, I want the color, whatever the dark or light red, to go over the edge, lining up that bottom, and then adding a couple pins. And there are 2 with dark red and 2 with a lighter red, and I'm doing dark light, dark light. You can do whatever order you want. Those dark and light reds will show a little bit on this, so it's up to you. I also have this big pocket on the bottom, and for this one I'm actually just going to find the middle of my pocket and line that up here with the middle of my design. And I don't want to line it up exactly with the chalk line. I want to bring it down. How far down can I bring it? I'll bring it down this far. And you can measure this distance if you want to make it perfect. You'll see that I have extra fabric sticking over the sides. Totally fine. I'm going to add a couple pins here. This one is not going to have any depth to it. It'll flop open a little bit as it gets weight in it anyway. And it looks like this pocket is going to stop right about here. That looks good. Now we're just going to do the same thing on the other side. Pinning, this bottom pocket is going to be flat, but these top pockets are going to have some depth to it. You'll see that in just a second here when we pin it. We're again lining up that pink line with the vertical and the bottom with the horizontal, and then adding a couple pins. And it does have some room here because those are going to go into our pleats. So we're not worried about that. We want that there. And then we have our backing fabric that we've set aside. That's a little bit bigger than our project. I'm going to put that right side up. And because of the weight of this, I'm going to actually put this right side down. All right, I have one side smooth. I'm going to add more pins, or I could use these same pins. Don't want to shift those though because I have them exactly where I want. So I'm just going to go add some pins. Okay, I pinned along the bottom, along the side, along the top, and I have this other side. Before I pin this next side, I want to show you what we're going to be doing in the next step, which is we're going to be drawing lines. This white line is a 1/4 inch away from the window, and then this red bit is another 1/4 inch away. So there's a 1/2 inch before we get into like the selvage fabric here. And so I'm wanting to make sure that that selvage fabric doesn't show. All right, I want to get this as smooth and flat as possible by bringing these lumpy bits all the way to the inside. And we'll just keep pinning. Okay, so we want to sew a 1/2 inch to the side of the windows when we sew up and down this edge. And you could do that with a different foot. I'll actually want to go just inside of a 1/2 inch. But I'm just going to line up the 1/2 inch mark on my ruler and just take a pen and draw this line. And this is just on the vertical, on the horizontal, the top and bottom. We're going to sew a 1/4 inch from the edge of this backing fabric. Not the backing fabric, but I guess the background fabric, sorry. And then on the sides, we're going to go a 1/2 inch, just shy of a 1/2 inch from the window. And that's going to cut off a little bit of our design slightly. I'm not worried about it. But it's going to give us much nicer looks on the edges of our rows because we're adding those pleats to our rows. If we wanted to be able to use the whole design, another option might have been to add extra fabric to the ends of those pleated rows beforehand, but that would have been a whole other step. And I didn't need that extra step for this project. So there are options if you don't like doing it this way. Ow, see, this is why I don't like pins. There are other options if you want to do it different ways, but considering all my options, oh, I'm bleeding. This is the way that I wanted to do it. All right, so now we're going to stitch all the way around. We're going to stitch just inside the line on the sides. We're going to stitch a 1/4 inch away from the top and from the bottom, and we're going to leave ourselves an opening. We need to leave it an opening somewhere on a side or a bottom. For this, I think I'm going to do the bottom because there's so many pieces here, and this should be the easiest place to leave that opening. So if this is where we're going to leave the opening, this is where we're going to start. I'm going to show you an extra little trick for when you start and stop, which is instead of starting along this edge, we're actually going to cut in. So I'm going to stitch in until I get a 1/4 inch in. Oh, and I've still got that long stitch length. So let's bring that back down. And then pivot. And then go around. And that's going to make it easier when this flips for the sides to tuck in nicely. So I'm going to go almost all the way around. When I get to the other side, I'm going to do the reverse of what I just did, where I'm going to pivot and stitch out. So let's just stitch all the way around. Okay, we have stitched it all the way around, and I started by going in and then around and then came back out, and that's going to make it easier to get this seam tucked in. when we're going to top stitch it, close at the very, very end, but that it's still a couple steps away. We want to trim this up, and you can do this with scissors, or you could just do it with a rotary cutter and ruler. If you wanted to double check, you could double check the inside to make sure that everything was caught. I am confident that everything was caught. I want to make sure that there's no pins left though before I go cutting, whether I do it with scissors or with a rotary cutter and ruler. And then I also want to check the back and make sure that all the edges were caught. It looks like it was a little crooked here, so just barely caught, but I'm going to top stitch on top of that, so that's fine. But I want to make sure there's no holes. So now I can trim this to a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then we're also going to clip the corners so that we don't have that extra bulk in the corners. And now we're going to clip these corners, and I like clipping my corners not too close to the edge and cutting more away from the sides. So I'll do it again here. I'll do it on the back, so hopefully you can see it a little better. So instead of just cutting like at a 45-degree across, I cut. Alright, so through this hole down here in the bottom, we want to make sure that we are going through the right layers. So I just want the layer between the backing and everything else. And when I pull things right side out, I like to go all the way to the farthest side and bring the farthest side through, and then everything kind of comes through evenly. And if that hole's big enough, then it's big enough for everything. Alright, looks a little bit of a mess, that's okay. I'm going to grab my ballpoint turning tool and bring it here inside and gently poke out these corners. And then we're going to give all the edges a press before moving on to stitching everything down. So we're going to stitch on these pockets vertically, so this way first, and that's going to separate out this bulk that we have here, and then we're going to stitch down the bottom, and that's going to finish up the pockets, and then we'll stitch around it and be done. So what we want to do is we want to take each of these pockets and line it up so the bottom is on this bottom line and the vertical line matches that chalk line, because we're going to be stitching down this vertical line. And I'm actually going to be stitching down on these, so I'm putting my pins facing up. And so the next one, and you can see that's going to create us a little pocket. It's like a little space. And we're going to do this for all the spaces between the pockets. Every single one we're going to pin down. Okay, you can see those pockets are all spread out and they're looking so good. We're going to start on the top and stitch down. So we're going to start here, we're going to go back and forth, and we're just going to stitch all the way down through all of them. And yes, that means there'll be a little stitching here that we'll see. You could just go through the top and then the bottom, the top, and then the bottom on each, but that just feels like extra work on this, and I don't mind that little bit of extra stitching. I am going to bump up my stitch length to that top stitch. Bring this, make sure it's lined up. So here at the top, I'm going to do a couple stitches forward, a couple stitches back. That's going to lock those stitches, and stitch all the way down. And depending on what's going to go in here, you might want to lock your stitches at the top of every pocket. The bottom is going to get secured again with a stitch across, so I'm not worried as much about the stress on the bottom of the pocket, but depending on like little hands coming in here, and like yanking on this, it might be a good idea to just have a couple extra stitches at the top. Oh, that's the third time I've poked myself on these pins. Ah, okay, so we're gonna be careful here. So yeah, if you've got little hands coming in, they might yank on these pockets a little bit, so it might be a good idea to just have those couple extra stitches down, stitches back up, and then stitches down again to hold it in place. All right, carefully, so I keep my stabbings of pins down to just 3 on this project. I'm going to stitch the vertical lines on the in-betweens of all these pockets down. When I get down to the bottom, I'll again lock the stitches just to finish off. And then when I cut these threads, maybe not with giant scissors, but just cut close here. All right, all of these are stitched down, all the pins are gone, and yes, we're going to be adding more pins. Now we want to make these all flat. There isn't a huge amount of space here. It's just a really, like, a 1/4 of an inch total pleat between the two sides. So you don't have to pin them if you don't want. I'm not going to. I'm just going to take it to the machine and do it on the bed of the machine. So it's just the tiniest little, basically taking this spot where the white and the red come together and bringing that over. And that's going to be the pleat. So we'll go ahead and do that on the machine. Starting from the bottom. So making that pleat. I'm going to come in here and we're going to do this top stitch. So 1/8 of an inch from the bottom. Do a couple stitches forward and then a couple stitches back. I love that the Baby Lock Jubilant is handling these layers. Stitching through all these layers, no problem. When I get close to this pleat, I want to make sure I do the next one. There we go. Actually going to use a pin here just to hold the pleat down. And if you want to pin these pleats because that's going to make it easier for you, go ahead and do that. Here, there we go. I'm just going to go ahead and do them one at a time as I sew. Mostly because I've been poked by enough of these pins already. Right, you can see these cute little pleats where everything's kind of coming together at the bottom. This one folded over itself a little bit, so that one I probably should have pinned, but I'm happy with it. Unless someone's looking really close, they're not going to notice. And so I'm going to go ahead and repeat that process for these other 3 rows. This one doesn't need any pleats or tucks. If you think heavier things are going to go in here and you're worried about this flopping forward though, you can go ahead and put some stitching lines in here. I might put a stitching line like right next to here and then right next to here where they're kind of hidden, and that would separate this into 3 pockets with a bigger pocket on the top. I'd make sure to lock those stitches here and give that extra security, but that way this wouldn't flop open as much, which depending on what you put in here, it definitely would. And I'm going to come back when we're ready to do the last step, which is to stitch all the way around and also stitch this hole closed. So I'll just go ahead and sew these last 3 sets of pleats down. Yay! Look how cute this is. And remember when we were cutting all these strips and they were a little bit wonky and I said it's not going to matter at all? It doesn't matter at all. You can't see any wonk in this. It looks cute, darling, perfect, and you can see that each of these pockets has a little dimension, so there's room to put a little bit bigger items, more than just like a slip of paper. But you could just put a slip of paper or a little note in here if you wanted. Okay, so last thing is to stitch all the way around. We're actually going to start here at the bottom, which is going to close this up. When I pressed it, I pressed the seam in already to get it lined up. So I'm going to start here in the white because that back and forth is going to be hidden a little bit, but I don't need to go back and forth when I start. I'm going to start, go all the way around 1/8 of an inch away from the edge, and that's also going to secure these sides of the pockets down. And then when I get here, I'm going to go back and forth to lock the stitches, and then this will be ready to hang up. So let's go ahead and bring it to the sewing machine. And I'm using that bigger top stitching stitch length. And there are a lot of layers down here in the pocket between the seam allowance of the pocket and the backing fabric and the background fabric and the interfacing on both the background fabric and the pocket. So it's a lot of layers. So just take it slow. And I want to make sure that I'm catching that backing fabric to close up this hole. Now when we get to a corner and we want to pivot, I want to have it about 1/8 of an inch away. Make sure my needle is down. That allows me to lift up my presser foot and pivot beautifully and put it back down, and then continue. And the machine here, the feed dogs of the machine are pulling the project through, so I really shouldn't have to push or pull. Alright, I've hidden those extra stitches here in the white where you can't really tell. And you can see this pocket's done. I didn't do that extra stitching here, still can if I decide to later. All my little pockets. Y'all, it's done. How cute did this turn out? You can look at it a little closer. Even with a little bit of the wonkiness in the panel, totally turned out perfect. Told you that it would. We've got all of our little pockets that are ready to go. We can just pin this up. I can pin it on top of my projects that I have here. And you can see, so you can see what I talked about here with this will gap open a little bit, and that's why it might be nice to stitch this up, but we can put all kinds of items in here. That's probably not a safe idea. But we have these perfect little pockets, and they all have their numbers on them. So every day you can find, there's 3, here's 1, 2, 3, there's 5. You can find your numbers. And yes, the ones here on the side don't have quite as much space, so any bulkier items you'd want to put here. But this is enough room for a couple pieces of candy, a little chocolate, a little candy bar. Something can go in each one of these days. And then you have all your fun little advent pockets. If you want something a little bit smaller that takes up less space, we talked about it early on, which is my pocket advent calendar, which comes with two sizes. The little bit smaller, which has these little smaller pockets, and they also have that depth. It uses a similar technique for adding the pleats, but the pleats are a little bit bigger. And then if you want a bigger one, this one also has the nice big pleats for having roomy pockets. And these are quick and easy to make as well if you want some other advent calendar options. This one's 24 days, this one is actually 25 days, and then this little one is designed to be just 12 days, so you have also a different number of days depending on if you want to do a 12 days of Christmas or all the way through Christmas or up till Christmas, and you could even put the 25th day down in this pocket if you wanted a 25th gift down here. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments, leave those down below. Make sure you subscribe to this channel. We have lots more holiday and Advent fun coming your way. I'm doing a whole bunch of Advent videos. I think it's over 40 Advent videos that I have planned through the rest of the year, as well as other holiday things, holiday gifts, gift ideas, gift wrapping. We're gonna have lots of fun this year. So make sure you hit that subscribe button, my friends, and I will see you right here real soon. Bye for now.